Hello, I'm Alan Kappa, South South News. I am with the youngest senator in the history of French governance and in the history of the region that he represents, which is French Polynesia. And island states and islands generally have a large number of difficult problems and difficult challenges to face as we move further in the 21st century. So I'm delighted to have and welcome Senator Ariiham Tuheiava, and thank you very much for being with us.
Good evening.
You are very young to be in politics, and it seems to me that you represent French Polynesia, you represent them in France because it is still French territory, and yet you would like to see that status changed in the future, in the near future probably, preferably.
Right, this is really part of the endeavor and the reason why I accepted to run into the politics for my country, and especially on a national level, because actually there is many reasons and a large history, sometimes for pain, sometimes for joy, with the state of France that French Polynesia crossed through and experienced. And we had a legacy as well, and we have a fantastic cultural heritage and natural heritage as well to preserve. And all of this is really are the roots and the seeds of my endeavor and my quest into politics today. So this is why also we are thinking about crossing through and turn this history and this past, suffering past sometime, into positive way and make positive changes. And this cross also, it leads us to change the status of the country and to move forward. Self-determination is indeed part of the quest, of the step, of the roadmap, and the people, of course. The populations of the Tahiti of French Polynesia will at the end decide whether we will stay into the Republic of France, whether we will be associated with it, or whether we will be independent, a full sovereign.
But it's the policy of your political party is really to separate from French governance.
Well, it's the policy is now getting deeper and proactive. It is full sovereignty, of course, but it can be a full sovereignty that could be under a free association,
right,
with State of France, for example. But it's going to be decided by the population. Our job is to raise the point to a level never reached before, right, to raise the voice of the territory, of this land, of the sea and the ocean. It's only one consciousness for us, and leads us to the United Nations, or directly to Paris and have a good discussion with them.
You're a campaigning politician, from what I've read about you, and there are a number of causes that you have been concerned with and identified with, and one which really very much reflects one of the United Nations Millennium Goals was the cause of children in Polynesia. What were the issues with children in Polynesia that were troubling to you and needed correction?
Before I started in politics, I was already involved into human rights leagues,
yes,
in French Polynesia, and I'm still continuing the job I was starting during that NGO. And so the reason why we started to raise the issue of the rights of the child is that the State of France has signed the International Convention, yes, on the rights of childhood, and it was in 2003. And basically what we have observed in French Polynesia, for instance, was that when child got mental diseases, or a child get arrested and put it in jail, they were not separated from adults. They were put with adults. In the two cases I've just mentioned, and there is also the case of the adoption that was too informal on a point. And the second point was that the child were adopted by people that came from foreign countries.
Yes.
Like it became like a trade
Yes.
of childhood, and our population was vulnerable.
People wanting to adopt Tahitian or Polynesian children because they're attractive, and
Right.
yeah.
And having it's a honor to have a Polynesian in its own family and they wanted to have a souvenir of this country. It's sometimes not in accordance. It's definitely not in accordance with the international convention,
Right.
and this is why we submitted the case in front of before the Committee of the Human Rights
Yes.
in Geneva.
Yes.
In 2004, and we succeeded because the things have changed now.
Yes,
And
yes.
we're happy for the child.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and you should be congratulated for the work that you did in Geneva, which I've been reading about actually before we met. Let's move on to another very, very serious subject, and that is the results, the legacy of nuclear testing in French Polynesia. Now, I know this is a very, very important issue to you, the future of those atolls and reparations by the French government to people who have been suffering from the results of those tests those years ago. Where does that stand at the moment? Where are you with all of that? And is there any hope that those atolls could ever be really used again?
Well, this is a very, very important issue, of course, indeed. The nuclear test during the 60s through the 90s represents one of the most suffering and painful souvenir for the whole body of, I would say, it's one consciousness, I told you, the body, the man and the nature of Polynesia. And basically it also damaged our way of behavior and the old ways that we've lost to this consuming society that we entered brutally and very fastly because of the pumping up of the level of life that we crossed through. Right. So, of course, the two atolls of Moruroa and Whangataua were subject to testing, 210 tests performed, and 47 in the air, and the rest under the water. Of course, it has allowed France, or it has pushed France to send a lot of money to our population during this decades. Well, at the end, we have now, in 2011, the worst place in the world, in the ocean world, where, how would I say, for contamination yes. in an oceanic, I would say, field. On an oceanic field, the marine, there is no other place in the world like this where the disease, the waste, nuclear the wastes are stored definitely for the next millennium. And so it's really something that we want to sort it out and raise in France. That was did. Of course, State of France passed a bill in 2010 called the Morin Bill, yes. Trying to satisfy and fulfill the will of the human victims. It's not, the objective are not yet reached because of so many controversy, legal issues. But separately, the environment is not treated. There is a overviewing, of course, of radiology and geology, but what I have submitted is a proposal of law to retrieve the two adults to the body of French Polynesia, of yes. Polynesia, first, and secondly, to organize a real overview consultation and to consult and to involve the authorities of Tahiti and the government of Tahiti and also the population around. They need to know the danger inside right. and when and how to move out and evacuate if ever something harm is going to happen.
How dangerous is this for the whole region of French Polynesia? Is it localized, or are the impacts all over the region?
Well, two issues. First, the documents, the nuclear documents, are sealed forever by a law passed by France, which is a shame. Yes. Second thing, that the two atolls belong still to the Ministry of Defense, meaning that no Tahitian is allowed to get on it.
But you've managed to get there.
I've been there due to my capacity of parliamentarian, of senator, and I'm supporting the association, the NGO of Tahiti that is working on it, Moruruai Tatou, and also the Aven in Paris, because they are the one who really have raised the debate on a national level, and they count on us. We're not too many senators or parliamentarians that are pushing this forward enough to raise this level on an international level, and I do hope that one day there will be a committee within the United Nations that will treat about the victim and the rehabilitation of the sites of all the places where the testing has been made.
Yes. What was it like going to those atolls? How did that feel? Very strange. Only people concerned with the military have been there, but was there still signs of complete devastation, or had some normality returned?
It is really troubling, because the first time I've been there, it was really troubling. I felt three emotions. The first one was the rage of so many testings being done there, and it was paradise.
Yes, it appeared to be paradise.
It appeared to be a paradise, and then when I've been there last year on June 2010, it looked like it never happened. Like the nature had taken his own rights again, but inside, that's the danger. Radioactivity doesn't show itself and show its name, and you take it and you don't even know. So it's really, the rage was there, but also the hope that finally nature is stronger than us and mankind. And when I've seen that, and all the species, all the fishes inside again, and with a big size of fishes inside, I was just telling myself and the rest of the group, look at this. We've done so harm to this nature, and it's still there, and it's still there, and then it's going to be there again. So many paradox.
Yeah, I can see
emotions.
It was a fascinating experience, I'm sure. Let's just talk about tourism for a moment, because I was thinking, do any of the thousands of tourists, hundreds of thousands of tourists that come to French Polynesia, I wonder if they're even aware of that particular history, and it doesn't affect the big islands, they would think. But what do you feel about tourism for French Polynesia? Do you think it is a good thing on the whole? Do you think that there may be a loss of ethnic values and culture with it, or is it beneficial for the economy?
Tourism was and stopped and need to become again one of the pillars of our development. But we don't want tourism like in Hawaii. No. We don't want that. We don't want a tourism also just appearances. We want a tourism that really highlights our values. We want a tourism that makes people feel like an experience when coming in Tahiti and feel the way we live. And not a tourism that allows them to just experience their way to live Tahiti and not ours. That's the most genuine thing. And I think that, it is true that there has been a decreasing of numbers of tourism because of so many things that happened, the instability, some riots in the 90s. But there is hope about tourism, and it should be again one of the pillars of our development and sustainable development for tomorrow, especially the cultural tourism. Because coming in French Polynesia and not experiencing culture is not coming.
No, and I know that's something you feel quite strongly about, that the protection of Polynesian culture and actually the projection of Polynesian culture, people understanding the music, dancing, costumes, traditions, all of those things. They can never disappear, really.
They have started. Something has started, a long process started, but now it feels like resilience is coming back. Resilience and trying to transcend what we've crossed through. New generations of students, of scholars, of lawyers, of legals, of decision makers as well, politicians, feel that former ancient conflicts need to stop, but also what we used to believe, that the nature and the man was forming one consciousness and one body. And this is what we need to affirm to the world, like the Maori are doing with the haka, like the aloha represents for the Hawaiian, and like the bula represents for the Fiji. We have also our values in Tahiti.
Well, you mentioned the haka. I mean, you're probably a rugby fan like myself, but you've been involved, very involved in the perhaps the restatement of Maori needs in New Zealand, and you've had a lot of success with that.
Indeed, we successfully passed the bill. Catherine Morin-Desailly, my colleague from France in the Senate, introduced that bill to retrieve all the Maori heads to the government of New Zealand, and especially not to the government, to the tribes, to the customary tribes of New Zealand, in order to set the path to another way of decolonization process to this. And I was feeling very honored to help and contribute to the decolonization process of our cousins, Pacific cousins.
It's the same geography, you share that, and some history too.
Right?
Yes.
Right, and so we passed the law at the Senate and then the Assembly Nationale in Paris, and I make myself, I took a really consideration the way that I wanted to be at the ceremony of the living and at the ceremony of the arriving of these Maori heads, to ensure that the mana, the power of these ancestors, will be just followed and accompanied by a Maori guy.
Well, you know, all your initiatives have been excellent, but all island cultures are facing particular difficulties looking ahead with climate change. And again, this is naturally a big issue that you are involved with, and it's a huge part of the United Nations Millennium Goals. How do you see the future for island states like French Polynesia? Is there a future? Are you looking at doom? Is it a science fiction scenario? What do you believe and what do you wish to happen?
Of course, some countries are more vulnerable than others in terms of the impact, physical impacts of the climate change. And of course, some countries are more responsible than others in terms of climate change too. But the result is that the whole mankind will face that, and the whole nature of the planet will face this impact. And the question was, how do I see the Pacific Ocean?
So far as anyone can. Yes.
Yeah, from a very regional perspective, because I'm not, you know, I don't want to speak to the other region, and I'm qualified to do that. But for my region, the region I love, the region I nurture, I try to nurture on a political way, is that there is a paradox between the resilience from the history we crossed through, from from each country that representing, each island representing Oceania, trying to find a way in these modern times to face in just a small time technologies, the small time optic fiber, internet, and so many other things, Facebook now.
Yes.
And the paradox is that in the meantime, we are obliged to think about our survival again, because the nature is taking its own right again, and we probably have a responsibility more than it's more responsibility that we need to take to steward this, and we have traditional knowledge as well that allows us to live for millennia and survive in this ocean. I don't know how and when and in which organization it should be made, maybe in the United Nations too, but there needs to be equal and a win-win exchange between the consideration taken to this traditional knowledge and the use of this for the survival of mankind,
Yes.
like we did.
Well, as you so rightly said, this is not just a problem facing French Polynesia or island states, it's a problem facing all of us. And it's something that I hope that we'll be able to talk to you about again sometime in the future. So, Senator Ariiham Tuheiava, thank you very much indeed for being with us, and we wish you
so much.
good fortune with all of your endeavours. Alan Kappa, South South News.